Hello, dearly beloved. We are gathered here today, so let's go to the United States of America and look at their house prices. This isn't just house prices, but this is the exact shape of house prices for Case-Shiller CoreLogic and the Case-Shiller 20 Composite. And they came down again yesterday. And that is the shape at the end, unfortunately. Unfortunately, why say unfortunately? They had to come down, so the sooner they come down, the sooner something else can happen. But this is actually the price to rent chart. And the prices and the price to rent are the same. They're back to where they were in 1999. And I'm not sure exactly what it means and how they work out this price to rent, but there it is. Basically, that's all I'm going to say. There it is. It was all flat along that number on the x-axis on the left there at 1, which I think is the good balance between price of a house and renting a house. And it had a little house price boom before the 1991 recession. The 91 recession calmed that down again all the way to 1998-99, where price to rents are kind of meeting now. I'll throw in Minsky because that's your basic chart. So what we have, this going back to 1983, and house prices had that little boom before 1991 and really started to take off again with the red line, which is the Case-Shiller Composite 20, in the year 2000, after the dot-com crash, or during the dot-com crash. What we have is Minsky here. Now, Minsky's instability hypothesis. He said that an economic system will become unstable due to any protracted length of time that it stays stable. Because people in the system will presume it is going to stay stable, and that takes fear away from them, and then they push the envelope. They start pushing possibilities, right? So in 83, 89, 90, right up to 2002, even we can say up to 2002, we go through start going through the Minsky stage of initially you get investment grade investments. There are going to be 3 grades. Investment grade was the first, that you just do naturally. You want to buy a house as opposed to renting a house, so you buy a house. Next you get speculative grade. Speculative grade is, well, I'm a bit torn between buying and renting, but I'm going to buy because it looks like house prices are going up, so it's speculative. You think, well, I'm going to ride this a bit and I could well win. But even if I don't win and house prices come down again, nothing really lost because my salary can cover the mortgage, and I will have lost and it'll be uncomfortable to be underwater or whatever, but my salary can cover the mortgage and it'll be uncomfortable, but I can go on. So we've been through investment grade, speculative grade, but after that, and really after 2002 and 3, we go into Ponzi finance, where people enter into the market buying houses in this instance, and they buy a house based on the fact that the prices will go up. And if the prices do not go up, in other words, they can't just roll it over and sell the house, then they cannot afford the mortgage. And that is Ponzi grade financing. So we've been through the 3 grades and end up with a Ponzi scheme of housing, and that's what we got from 2004, 5 right up to the boom, the bust. Okay, so that's the Minsky system that says it will become unstable because of its long length of intrinsic stability or seeming stability. Nobody believed anything could possibly go wrong, but of course, as soon as you get through those grades and up to Ponzi, it will definitely go wrong. Okay, moving on. I'm excited. Okay, I think I was excited a couple of days ago, wasn't I? I think that was about Steve Keen as well, going to Berlin, to the INET conference. Conscious of a Liberal, Paul Krugman, New York Times, Minsky and Methodology, wonkish. Now, wonkish for a Paul Krugman article in the New York Times means it's not really for you non-economists people. You've got to understand economics to really read this article, or you'll just be lost. So don't bother with it. Wonkish, that's what it means. So only economists welcome. Let's go and have a look. Steve Keen, it opens with Steve Keen has a new post up, yes, with a link to a new paper. Now, we have all linked to the new paper, and we've all read it from start to cover to end, and all understood it, haven't we? No, all right, but doesn't matter. Come on. About Minskyan, or is it Minskyite, economics, and how people like me get it wrong, like Paul Krugman gets it wrong. Well, good for him, says Paulie. Debates like this are always productive, and I wish domestic responsibilities weren't keeping me from going to the Berlin conference so I could have a little chat with you and tell you, Stevie, where you're going wrong. It's a pretty grotty little article, this. But let's get to the one paragraph that I've pulled out that I think's the whole thing revolves around, and in its own way it's the naughtiest paragraph. Although, if you read the article, it's not long. He never writes much for the New York Times. Well worth reading all of it. Link number 2. Right, 3 lines. Keen doesn't seem to be doing that. Don't worry about that. His paper contains a number of assertions. Oh, bugger. All of this, and I've pulled out the wrong article, the wrong paragraph. I'm going to have to go to it. I can find it. Don't worry. Here, just play among yourselves. I'll be seconds. It comes after that paragraph. Okay, still 3 lines. That's where I got confused. Let's check it's right. Okay. Are we back? We're back. I told you I was excited. In particular, comma. I'll change it over so we'll have this up now. And I'll leave the last paragraph in because the other 3 lines was the paragraph before this one. So going with the what'll be through to C. In particular, he asserts that putting banks in the story is essential. Now, this is to confirm. I had this I had a little bit of comment with Axion just yesterday, talking exactly this. He asserts that putting banks in the story is essential. Now, for story, read model. In economics, they have models. So for story, when he says story, he means modelling. When you're modelling things in economics, that's what he means by story. He asserts that putting banks in the story is essential. In other words, putting banks in your model is essential. Now, I'm all for including the banking sector in stories, in models, where it is relevant. But why is it so crucial to a story about debt and leverage? Why are banks so crucial to a story about debt and leverage? Leverage, which is loans, debts. Now, this is a very naughty paragraph because I think he's got away with it with the wonkish. In other words, economists know what he's talking about, but the general public wouldn't. And he's treating Keen as though he was a member of the general public, and he wouldn't understand what El Maestro, Nobel Prize winner for economics Krugman, is saying here. You know, I'll just run it one time more. In particular, he asserts that putting banks in the story is essential. Now, I'm all for including the banking sector in stories where it's relevant, but why is it so crucial to a story about debt and leverage? Now, this is just cheeky. It's just kind of tweaking somebody's nose because, and it's tempting. It's a flirtatious thing because what he's saying here is, he's saying something that's obviously provocative. Why put banks in a model about debt when obviously banks have got to be in a model about debt for a normal person? But what Krugman's got behind this is that he's kind of hiding just behind a little veil that he's going to go, ha ha, this is what I meant all along. When you get him on that, what you say to him, well, of course you've got to put banks in a story. That's a model, a story about debt. Of course you've got to. And he goes, ha, 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 you obviously don't know your economics, you poor little cretin. What Krugman is talking about here. And he even says in this article, I can read it from here, I wrote about this a long time ago in that piece written around 1991. In other words, I've known this for ages. Right. The way Krugman and other economists look at this, why you don't have to put banks in a model when you're modelling the economy, including debt, is because you've got two people. You've got A and B. You've got A, who has money, who spends a lot of that money, but then has some money left over that he doesn't want to spend. So this is for aggregate demand, is what the rest of the article's about, aggregate demand. So he doesn't want to demand anything else with that money. So he puts it in the bank. The bank takes that money and lends it to B, who then spends it. So what Krugman's saying is it does not matter whether A spends the money, all the money, or A spends some of the money, puts some of the money in the bank lends it to B, and then B spends the money. The effect, the aggregate demand in the economy is exactly the same. Okay? Now, this is the little, ooh, look how clever I am, that will be revealed if anybody has a go at Krugman on that paragraph. And it's so facile that I find it slightly pathetic, because we'll go back to where I was introducing the Keane paper to you and inviting you to link and read it, about endogenous money creation. A spends some money, puts some money in a bank. Who cares? B comes along. When he borrows money, he doesn't borrow A's money. The bank makes endogenous money from the inside out, endogenous money, and gives it to B. It is new money. And this is what the difference is. And you could say, well, that makes no difference. As long as the bank only lends the amount of money that A put in the bank. But the B couldn't give a shit how much A's put in the bank. The bank will lend to B, if the bank's in the mood, exactly the amount of money that B wants. A spends 90, puts 10 in the bank, for instance. The bank could lend B $1 million. But Krugman doesn't take any notice of that, because he does not understand the fact that banks create endogenous money, printed from nowhere and just spent into the economy. To be in a mortgage could easily be $1 million, but it's not in Krugman's story, stroke models, because he doesn't understand how banks work. And it's a real shame that Krugman won't be going to Berlin to have a little chat with Steve. Right. Let's go on to the next, which is number 3, New York Times. Paul Krugman, Conscience of a Liberal, and it's only 4 paragraphs long, so I'm going to read the whole lot. Just a small note today about today's column. Doing the research, I found myself feeling as if I had turned over a rock and found a lot of creepy, crawly things underneath. This is really upsetting stuff. Look, in particular, at the semi-secret history of Arizona immigration law, Just go with this. A legislator goes into a closed-door meeting with corporations, including a big operator of private prisons, and soon afterwards submits legislation that sends a lot of people to those private prisons. If you read the corrections to that report, you see that ALEC, A-L-E-C, and or its clients went over the piece with a fine-tooth comb to find anything that they could attack. Sure, you can't prove that the Corrections Corporation of America, bless them, they sound lovely people, inspired the law, or that ALEC lobbied for it. Hey, it all could be a coincidence. Covering his arse there, but this is really, really creepy and scary. Krugman, bang on. Absolutely bang on. And if you're an American person, a USAite, and you don't know who ALEC are, you should be ashamed of yourself. If you don't know, Google and keep Googling till you know how horrible ALEC is. Right, moving on. Number 4. The Billion Prices Project from MIT. They didn't think that the CPI was covering enough bits and bobs in the economy. So MIT, they can handle data. They were going there. I think, I don't know if they've got the whole billion in yet, but in the end, they'll have the whole billion prices that they can follow in America. Huge idea. Annual inflation, CPI in blue, billion prices project in red. That's come down from 4% annual inflation, billion prices project now down to 2% inflation. Have to go back to Shadow Stats and John Williams if you want big numbers. Over in the EU, Olli Rehn, tells Spain, stick to deficit targets. The European Union's top economic official said the recent sharp rise in Spanish borrowing costs was the result of perceptions Madrid was seeking to wiggle out of the tough deficit shrinking targets caused on the Spanish government to push through more austerity measures, called on the Spanish government to push through more austerity measures. And another paragraph from that article in the Financial Times. Despite signs Spain was headed for one of Europe's deeper recessions, Mr. Rehn said Madrid would only regain market confidence by sticking to EU mandated deficit targets, which require the Spanish government to cut their deficit cut it down to 3% of economic output by next year. Last year's deficit was 8.5, meaning Madrid had to make some of the deepest cuts in any Eurozone country outside Greece, down to 3%. Link number 6, Forex Live. Spanish government deficit rises in the first 2 months of the year, January and February. Spain ran a deficit of 1.9% of GDP in the first 2 months of the year. I'm no math genius, but that works out at about 12% for the year, if that level is sustained for the rest of the year, and that's rather above forecast. Spain is in deepo doo-o. United Kingdom, Jeff Randall. I don't like Jeff Randall, and you can understand why from reading when I read these paragraphs. Not a good way of writing, and I think it comes from a bit of a grotty mind. Anyway, it doesn't mean that he can't add up numbers and present them well enough. Well, not present them, but the numbers are good. Right, maybe. No, they're good because they're from the OBR. Good morning, everyone. Let's start the week with a gentle quiz. By the end of this Parliament, will the United Kingdom's national debt be A, higher, B, lower, C, about the same, or D, eliminated altogether? Balls, stop peeping over at Osborne's notes. Clegg, put away that calculator. The answer is, of course, A, which was higher. In just 4 years' time, our state debt, United Kingdom, will be 40%, yes, 40% higher than it is today. 40% higher than it is today. By 2015-16, Thanks in part to the power of compound interest, the government will owe on our behalf more than £1.4 trillion, compared with just over £1 trillion now. The extra £400 billion is equal to 1 year's income tax, VAT, corporation tax and national insurance combined. Austerity, how's it working for you? Let's finish with this. I know I've been a bit long, but let's finish off this. I don't know if it's lighter or not. It's a letter to the editor of the Singapore Times. Singapore has decreed that maids must be given at least 1 day off per week. This did not go down well with Thung Tien Guan, who wrote an aggrieved letter. I read with disbelief that the government has decided that all maids will get weekly day off from next year. More likely to actually maybe talk like that, but it doesn't matter. Let's go to the bottom. Because he's thinking about the maids, of course. You know, the maids. He's thinking about the maids here. And the impact on the maids. The problem is not whether the maids will use their days off to run away. Rather, the exponential increase in days off, and I love that exponential in there. You know, these really bright people use exponential just where it's necessary. The exponential increase in days off may lead them to squander their hard-earned pay, instead of saving it to help finance a better life for when they return home. And the higher risk of promiscuity, extramarital affairs, and unintended pregnancies also are possible consequences. So it shows how feeling and caring Ting Tieng Guan is about his maids. Leave it there. Do one for you tomorrow, probably. Bye.